All right. Just make sure everything's working here. All right. Hey, everybody. I have a special broadcast today. We're going to be talking about growing your audience, putting out great content in the service of leveling up your Kickstarter launches. And I have an awesome guest to talk with me about that. So my guest today is a Pittsburgh-based comic artist. He's a writer, he's a freelance illustrator, and he's best known for the series Soul of the World and the series Odyssey Inc., which are on Webtoons, and right now Odyssey Inc. is actually right on Kickstarter. If he looks familiar, he's frequently interviewing other artists and creators on his YouTube channel, which he's been growing rapidly, and he's also often on social media and has a great newsletter where he provides tips to creators who are looking to build their own confidence in their work and eventually make a living off their art. So I'd love to just welcome back to the ComixLaunch podcast, Dan Ekis. Welcome back, Dan. How you doing?
Great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, especially on launch day. Totally, it's a big get considering your project's live on Kickstarter right now, and we will be shouting that out in a sec. But before we sort of dive in and talk about your projects and your audience growth strategies and everything that you're up to, how are you doing? Like, this is obviously I've been having a bunch of conversations and interviews with creators all over the world. And we're in sort of a situation where, what's going on in the world I don't think has ever felt smaller in the sense that everyone's being affected by the global pandemic. But how are you holding up? And how you doing?
I'm great, man. Honestly, I'm actually busier now. One of my clients is the New York Department of Health. And I draw a comic for them, a web comic, and we're doing a bunch of COVID-19 comics now to help, just like educational content to help slow the spread and things like that. So I've been busy with that and busy finishing this graphic novel, prepping the Kickstarter. But my mental and emotional health is good, so I'm staying sane. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, I mean, we've sort of joked that this is a different experience based on sort of where you're at in your life, and the creators with kids have suddenly seen time as just going away like that. Creators that are a little bit younger and they have their own issues to deal with. I don't think anyone, there's no one that's excited about what's going on, but I'm glad to hear that you're making the best of it, and that and this is something that we've sort of been talking about a lot. There's assumption when you read the news and the headlines that everyone is in wild panic mode, or everyone is completely losing out on all sorts of opportunities. But the truth is, this is a big disruption, and some people like yourself are actually busier than you've ever been with work. So that's great to hear that, and great to acknowledge and know. But let's talk Kickstarter. So you launched your project today. This is a project called Odyssey Inc. And let me I'll pull it up on the big screen here. But tell us a little bit about this project and how you're feeling so far here on day one. Already past 30% funded on day one, so that's got to feel pretty good. But tell us a little bit about this project and how you're feeling here on launch day.
Sure. So the project is a 60-page hardcover graphic novel called Odyssey Inc. The Twin Bengals. It's about a team of heroes who get hired to travel to the most dangerous parts of the world. And in this story, they go to Southeast Asia to save a couple of tigers from being sold on the black market. And it's very much inspired by Indiana Jones, The Rocketeer, Uncharted, those sort of globe-trotting adventure series. So anyone who's into those type of stories will get a kick out of it for sure. And in terms of the launch, I'm feeling pretty good. As you know, I've been taking the ComixLaunch course, so I'll be happy to give you a free testimonial here because it saved my life, man. It's just so overwhelming planning a launch. It's just so much to consider. I don't know that much about the Kickstarter platform. I've only done like a couple small launches. So your course has been a godsend, dude. It's been so great. And if you're looking at my page, I hope you don't mind, but I kind of like aped on the sheet Kickstarter that you guys did. I looked at your page and I liked the layout so much that I just kind of copied it and put everything in my own words.
Yeah, so. No, well, then I won't make myself silly feeling complimenting you on the page. But honestly, you know, the page design that you've rocked and that I rock is the same design that I teach inside of ComixLaunch Pro, and the you know, everything is in its own place for right reasons and right orders. But I think you're somebody that recognizes the power of a strong visual, and you're really leaning into some great visuals on your page as I'm just scrolling through. So yeah, no problem at all. We share these because the overall goal is, you know, rising tide, you know, lifts all boats. And so we want every project to succeed on Kickstarter, as many as possible, especially worthy ones. So as we're sort of in this whole thing, I know there are a lot of creators that have been, you know, questioning whether or not now's the time to launch, and was that something that you had sort of wrestled with a little bit, or did you just sort of commit to saying, hey, you know what? I mean, like, yes, pandemic on one side, on the other side, tigers are so hot right now, considering the #1 documentary in all of America prominently features tigers left and right, and so that's some good timing that you want to strike when the iron's hot. But how did you sort of make that decision in terms of when to launch, and whether or not, you know, it was still a good time to launch for you?
Honestly, man, again, you're my go-to guy for all this stuff. So you send a thing out on your newsletter talking about the subject. It was like a Facebook Live thing or something. So I just listened to that, just considering the pros and the cons. And what you said on there, one of the things that stuck with me was that the same amount of people are pledging to Kickstarters right now in the comics space. So I was like, I'm just going to do it. And it's kind of a blessing in disguise. It is a very unfortunate situation we're all in with the pandemic. And, you know, my heart goes out to everyone who is who's affected by this and all the different ways that it's affecting people. For me, though, you know, I have a lot more free time. My social life and my dating life is kind of non-existent now. So I'm able to put more time into a launch like this. So I think it's a good time. Yeah.
And, you know, as someone that's been there, leaning in when you have the time, leaning in when, you know, when it's your time, like, these opportunities may not always be here. And so, you know, there's this concept of sort of work-life balance and everything, but and I know we all want that for our mental health, and it can't be all work, but there will be some times when it's like, you know what, this is pedal to the metal, let's go after it, because that's going to pay dividends down the line. And you know, one of the things that, you know, when I look back at some of the days when I was like really grinding it, like, it's nice because now I have less time, but I'm building on a platform, and I'm building on and reaping the benefits from seeds planted years and years and years ago. And so I know that that's actually been a big part of your strategy. And you've been focusing on audience growth, and you've been focusing on a couple of platforms in particular, where you've seen a lot of growth since the last time we sort of we talked, and since the last time you were sharing some of your Instagram strategies here on the Comics Launch podcast. And I think you shared some other things with our group in the past. But where have you been focusing on in terms of building audiences, and what's been working for you?
So I do a weekly email newsletter, but in order to get people onto that, the platforms I focus most on are Webtoon, which is a webcomic platform, and then YouTube as well. I have an Instagram, but I don't post as much as I should on there. But YouTube and Webtoon have been very good to me. I've seen a lot of growth in the past year, and I'm happy to talk about specific strategies if you want.
Yeah. So, and I will also put out, I know we do have some folks that are watching live, and we're recording this and sort of live streaming. And eventually this will be on the Comics Launch podcast as well. But if there are anyone that has questions for Dan or about any of the topics that we're going to cover here, feel free to post them in the chat. Maybe we'll get to them and be able to answer them while we're live. One of the advantages of doing these live in front of an audience. But also feel free to definitely come in. And here's one. Is it weird I have this on in the shower? Thanks, Colin. Yeah, so we're in the shower with Colin Devonshire. Colin. How goes it? Shout out to Colin, who's a hardworking ER doc in Boston, and we're sort of in the peak of our things right now. But Colin is he's been making drinks a lot and streaming drinks and finding ways to decompress. He's also actually moving up. He's got a launch coming up that he's actually moving up because he's ready to go. And you know what? Let's strike while the iron is hot. But yeah, that's funny, Colin. But yeah, let's talk about those. So of the two, Webtoons and Utoon, let's start with Webtoons. What made you decide to go the Webtoons route, and what have you learned about what it takes to start building a following over there?
So basically, I had a mentor of mine. I took like a social media marketing workshop a while ago. And one thing they said was be willing to test out new platforms that you're not that familiar with. And that was Webtoon for me. I'd never really done web comics or anything. So it was a new experience. But I did see that there's a potential. There's a lot of traffic on that website. And if I could I'm going to drop some like sort of evergreen universal things that people can do that will help you build an audience on any platform, at least in my opinion.
You got it.
And the first one would be like, be on the right platforms where there is a lot of traffic, where there are a lot of eyeballs. Because I see people like with Facebook, if you're posting on Facebook, you know, it might have changed now, but when I looked into it, you kind of had to pay for ads to get exposure on there, which is a great thing to do if you want to do ads. But in terms of doing like a free page, I don't know how easy it is to get exposure on there. And I don't know if that's the best example, but there's certain platforms that people just, it's tougher to gain traction on, long story short. So Webtoon, I saw one as being good. And then what I did was, this is my second evergreen tip, whatever platform you go on, find the people who are having success on that platform and reach out to them, interview them, and figure out what you can do or what they did that you can do to have the same sort of success. So I had an artist who, she had like 1,000 subscribers to her webcomic on, Mary Mark, and she told me basically she was consistent with putting things out every week. She put out like a new episode every week. And also I had heard from people sort of behind the scenes at Webtoon that they do pretty much look at everything that gets uploaded. So I kind of had that attitude every week. Like, okay, if they're watching, I want to show them that I'm serious. And eventually what happens is they'll feature different comics on what's called Canvas, which is sort of the homepage, and they'll feature different creators and promote you. So that's what happened with ODYSSEY Inc. And I wound up getting like 10,000 subscribers from that, which was a huge blessing, you know. And now I have loyal readers every week. You can see all the comments there.
Yeah.
People commenting on my comic, and it's a great interaction. It's a very, very good culture on there. Everyone's real like optimistic, positive, supportive. So that's the second thing, is find people who are having success, preferably people who have had recent success. Because you could find someone who grew their audience, you know, a few years ago, but the algorithm could have changed. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. It definitely seems with Webtoon, you know, there is a sort of two-class system in terms of the, you know, here's sort of the headliners that are Webtoons exclusives. Sorry, my dog is losing it. He loves a good Webtoon when he can.
He's excited about my Kickstarter.
He really is. He's like, back. It's not barking. He's saying back. He's backing. Yeah. So this is great. Like, but so I know that they have like sort of the Webtoons originals. And then there's the Canvas, which anyone can do. So this is a platform. It's a free platform. Anyone can get their project up there today. And I do know that there are been some creators that, you know, will have a project that's on Canvas, and then they get upgraded and become like a Webtoons featured or original. But you are still a creator that's still on Canvas, but still getting those results, right?
Results as in
terms of subscribers and things, but you're not you're not getting pushed buy Webtoons as like,
Yeah.
on their dime, right? Yep.
Yeah, not weekly, no.
Mhm.
And the featured artists, like their headliners, as you say, those are people who get paid by Webtoons to create
Right.
content for them. I'm not one of those people.
Mhm.
I'm just a free user, and I just upload my comics there.
Great. Now, how long were you updating before you got that sort of featured bump? Because as you said, like much like getting featured on the front page of Kickstarter will give you a nice little surge when your Kickstarter campaign is live. Getting featured on the front page of Webtoons or promoted and getting a spotlight, even as a canvas creator, like as you said, you saw a big surge as a result of that. How long had you been putting your stuff out before that you sort of got that little extra bump?
Well, the first time it ever happened to me, Tyler, was on my previous comic, Soul of the World. And I was putting out one episode a week for about 26 weeks or something like that. And then they just gave me a bump, and I got like 1,000 subscribers from that. And that was that. And then it kind of topped off.
Yeah.
And then with Odyssey Inc., I think it was even less than 20 weeks probably. But you just got to be consistent. And it's a universal thing I've noticed with all these different platforms, YouTube, Webtoon, but you're kind of at the mercy of their algorithm or the way that they operate. And some would say, well, you just got lucky, but luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right? So do everything you can do to get featured by their algorithm, to get featured on their platform, whatever platform you're on. And you just increase your chances of getting more exposure. So
yeah, and something that you've made a part of your overall strategy is you understand that success leaves clues, and so that can make, like, with things like podcasting, like the average podcast is like 6 episodes long, and then they give it up. And most YouTube channels out there probably have less than a dozen videos, and there's a lot of probably abandoned Webtoons because people didn't see that growth. And like in the grand scheme of things, 20 weeks, 30 weeks, it's nothing. But when you go into it with an expectation of sort of instant gratification, that's not really this game, especially when you're on a platform that is algorithm based and you can't, don't have a way to juice it. So I think that's great insight for a lot of creators out there, especially those that are like, yeah, I've been posting on Webtoons for 2 months and nothing's happening. Well, keep going. And I want to just talk briefly about format, because I noticed, for Odyssey Inc., which is your Kickstarter project, it looks like a traditional graphic novel. But one thing that I did notice, and this is a question that some creators have when it comes to whether, like, how they approach Webtoons, you've definitely designed for the scroll and the Webtoons format. Can you talk a little bit about that decision? And then also, do you have any tips or things that are tips or tricks or things that you've learned about just formatting your comics for this format?
Yeah, definitely. Webtoon works best when you post like one panel at a time, because it's what you call scroll comics. So you read a panel, then you scroll down to the next panel. And I've sort of made my style of comics very traditional in that there's not a lot of overlapping panels or anything crazy or artistic about it. It's pretty much like rectangle, rectangle, rectangle. So that makes it very easy to cut and paste them and scale them down into, the 800 pixels wide that you need to have them for Webtoon. So I just have a formatted Photoshop file. It's like 800 pixels by whatever the standard height is. And then I'll copy and paste all of my panels onto separate layers and cut and paste all of the speech bubbles onto the layers that correspond with the panels and merge them down. And then you can do a batch export in Photoshop that just exports all the layers, and then you have all your images and you just select them all, click and drag them to Photoshop or to Webtoon. And it does take time. That's time I have to take out of my weekend to do. So eventually I'd like to be able to hire an assistant to format them for me for uploading. And I know some people do that, but it pays off. And the last thing I would say is that people on Webtoon, they like longer episodes. So if you're someone, you already have like a big graphic novel or a few issues of your comic done, and you can upload like 4 to 5 pages worth of content into one episode, people love that. It's not really sustainable if you're not working on your project full time. Like I do it on the side, so it's really hard to get longer episodes. But if you can do that, I'd recommend it because people like it.
Yeah, and I know the so one of the questions that I think that creators will have is, all right, I'm building up my audience on Webtoons, but when it comes to Kickstarter, how do I get them from Webtoons to Kickstarter? And so I'm wondering if you're doing anything specifically to tap into the thousands of eyeballs that have at least giving you some time of day over here. Right now 176,000 views total and 10,000 plus subscribers. What are you doing? What can you do in order to drive that traffic to your Kickstarter?
What I do is I play a long-term game with everything. So what I do every week, I put out an episode, so they'll get a little bit of the story of the comic, and then at the end there's a call to action that says Kickstarter April 28th, and another one that says danekis.com/newsletter. So I'm want to get people over to my mailing list and get them on there so I can send them a link, because YouTube doesn't really let you post links, which is a little unfortunate. But just people reading the comic every week, and every week they're going to see Kickstarter April 28th. I got a ton of comments of people saying, can't wait for the Kickstarter. I can't wait to get the physical book. Count me in, that kind of thing. So just hyping it up. And
yeah. And so, that is one of those things where, Webtoons and most free platforms, they will, they do make it difficult to, insert a ton of links, because they want to keep, like, their whole business model is keeping the butts on their platform. But I see you basically, created a update, which is not a web comic, but it's an update, which is what people that are subscribing and are used to seeing from you, that visually lets people know that the campaign is live, and shows off some of what they can get, and some stuff looks really great here, Dan. And so that's there, and you've got a link in the creators notes, and you got a couple people commenting already, so that's great. So I think that's a great strategy for creators that are building it up over at Webtoons. And so you also, the other thing that I like, that I think that you said is, or that you're doing, is that you're using one platform to support what you're doing on another platform, and trying to find connections. So reaching out to Webtoon creators who have an audience and following, and then inviting them to be interviewed for your YouTube show, is a way that you can, sort of kill two birds with one stone, as it were. What have you learned about growing over at YouTube, and what's been your strategy there, and what have you found that's worked as you've consistently put out content over there? I imagine the consistency is a big key to it over on YouTube as well.
Oh yeah. I've been at it for like 2 or 3 years now, so it takes a long time. It's much slower growth than any other platform, I think, but it's the same basic principles. It's a platform with a lot of eyeballs. It's still one of the biggest search engines in the world.
Yep.
And I just look for people who know how to get exposure on that platform, and I just followed their advice. And YouTube is great because there are actually whole YouTube channels geared toward telling you how to grow your YouTube channel. And I just do what those guys tell me. It's the same thing with ComixLaunch. Like, if you want to have a successful Kickstarter, do what Tyler James is telling you. You know what I mean? So it's like really simple, but it is a lot of hard work. And I also read marketing books, and I do lots of other little things. Like one big thing on YouTube is like the title and the thumbnail are the two biggest things that determine whether people click on your video. And how I get the best titles and the best thumbnails, usually it's either audience member will suggest a topic to me in the comments, and I'll just make that the title of the video. And so a lot of people click on it. Or what you can do if you have an email newsletter, usually you can look at the percentage of opens from your list, and whatever gets the highest percentage open of your email headline, that could be a good title for a YouTube video.
Right.
Same thing with the thumbnail. I always put my artwork in the thumbnail, and how I determine which ones are the most attractive to people is through Instagram. I basically post all my art on there, and whichever images get the most likes, I know that's an image people are most likely to click on. And some of my highest performing videos are these titles and these thumbnails that I knew would do well.
Yeah.
And yeah, even just reading books on marketing and things like that, there's gold nuggets of information everywhere. One specific example is I read in this marketing book that the most attractive headline ever is tell people they can have exactly what they want without having to do the thing that they're most afraid to do. And so I have a video called How to Build a Following Even If Your Art Sucks. So people are afraid I'm not good enough, I can't build a following, but it's like, yeah, you can, even if your art sucks. That's one of my highest performing videos. That was a little thing that I read in a book like 2 years ago, and I applied it. And you know,
yeah, I mean, that is a great formula and a tried and true copywriting thing. That's, you know, one of the best skills that you can learn when you're starting to do this is copywriting, and so I think that's a great example of that. I also just wanted to comment that especially when you're using free platforms like a YouTube or like other things, when you're trying to craft content that's going to attract an audience, you want to be making the content for that audience sort of first and yourself second. And I see a lot of creators that like, all right, I'm going to post something on YouTube and I'll call it the, you know, My Name Show, episode 1, obscure thing. And it's like YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world, owned by the largest search engine in the world, but nobody is searching for that headline or that thing that you titled. But what people are searching is things for how to grow an audience. What if my art sucks? How do I get better art? Like, and so by being just a little bit strategic, you take a video that would never get found to a video that gets a ton of views. So that's absolutely a huge idea.
Yeah, and that's if I could just give like 3 quick tips. That is one of them. That's one of my top tips is do a survey with your target audience. Say, what's the #1 thing you'd like to learn about? And that's what I did. And I found you'll start getting a lot of the same sort of answers from people. One for me was like how to make money, how to get art commissions. I have a lot of self-doubt. I lack confidence. So I teach people how to build confidence, all of the things like that. And that's how I know they're going to click on the video. And if I make a video that's titled like, hey, here's what I did this Saturday, they're going to be like, I don't care. I came to you to learn about how to build confidence. You know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, it's such an easy hack.
It's 101. Yeah.
People will be like, Tyler, you're reading my mind again. How do you know? I'm like, how do I know? Because you told me 2 months ago, or someone like you told me 2 months ago. And, you know, something, you know, I did in my private Facebook group. One of the things that I ask when people request to join the private Facebook group and ComixLaunch.com/group, if anyone wants to jump in, if you're watching live, you can put that in the chat, just ComixLaunch.com/group, and come in and apply to come in. But we do make people answer a couple questions. It's free to get in, but we want to make sure it's the right people in there. But one of the questions, that middle question is, hey, what are you struggling with? And or what's your biggest struggle right now? And what I did, what I did last week was I took 3 of them, used the exact language, and put out a poll in the group and said, hey, which of these is your biggest struggle right now? And then the one that is the biggest struggle, I just wrapped up a free training on that'll be made available to the group this week. The one that was the poll winner, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit of a process that you can do and run just forever and make sure that the content that you're creating is actually, you know, valid. Because if one person says it's a problem for thousands and thousands. It's just kind of just how, humanity works. Someone in one of the private groups says YouTube seems like a crazy amount of work to build a following on. What do you think? Is it a crazy amount of work? And what is one or two tips to, even if it is a crazy amount of work, to make it a little bit less work, a little bit less stressful?
Yeah,
Dan.
It's a good bit of work, but again, a thing I learned from a mentor of mine is find ways to sort of batch your content and spread it across multiple platforms. So like if you're making a YouTube video, you can also post it on other platforms. But I'll record myself drawing. That's the format of my videos. I have to draw my comic anyway, so I just record myself drawing, and I do like a voiceover. It usually takes, like 10 minutes, but it also takes a lot of time to edit it down. I say and like all the time, so I have to edit that out. And it's a lot of work, but there's a thing I did for a long time was just interviews with creators. That's a great way to grow your audience. It's not as effective as short form videos, but it will get you traction. I did an interview with Rachel Smythe. She's the creator of Lore Olympus, one of the biggest webtoons on that platform. And people are searching for her on YouTube, like you said. And I get people coming into my audience because they're searching for her. And I interviewed her, and we had a great discussion. So if you can collaborate with creators who already have a pre-existing audience, just interview them. And people will say, well, I'm not really good at interviewing people. I wasn't either when I started doing this 2 years ago. But write down 5 to 6 questions, get them talking for 10 minutes for each of those questions, and you have an hour-long podcast to put out, and just keep asking questions. The more questions will pop up in your head as they talk. And that's really it, And so just find ways to take the work that you're already doing and package it as YouTube videos, like recording yourself drawing or working on your project, or just hanging out with other creators. And that's a good way too.
Yeah. And it's, a little bit of a meta thing right now, but right now, what we are doing is we are recording this live in real time. We're streaming on Facebook in a couple of places on Facebook, in a private group, on a public page and a business page, and on my own personal page. And we're also simultaneously streaming on YouTube right now. So wherever you're watching us, we're on a couple of different broadcasts and a couple of different channels. And then these videos are going to live on beyond this. Who knows? You could be then sharing this video that you recorded with me to a playlist that you have, linking. We're cross promoting, and then in a couple of weeks this will air on as a podcast. So that is one way to make the crazy amount of work actually sort of fit into a stream and a process that is really not a crazy amount of work. And can
I say one more thing? Actually,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because there's a thing I'm doing now. I want to start putting out like 2 videos a week if I can during this Kickstarter campaign. So one thing I'm going to be doing is going back through my old podcasts that I've done that a lot of people haven't heard yet, pull out clips from them, 10-minute clips, and there's a 10-minute video. You know what I'm saying? So you can use old content and repurpose it as well.
Yeah, and that's just a smart thing to do. You're building out a library that can then be put, can sort of live on. And then when you have things like your email list, you can then use your emails to point people back to your best content. And you don't have to constantly be creating something new all the time. You can actually just, play the hits. Like the Rolling Stones aren't making up new songs every time they go to play. They would have been done. They would have retired a long time ago if they had to. You play the hits. This was a cool question from Josh, and figure we'll riff on it just for a minute. But he says, where should I start with my comic graphic novel? I have the idea, story, and characters, etc. But where should I start? How would you, what's the next step that you would tell someone like Josh? Not the next 100, because there will be 100 steps, Josh. But it's really about putting one step in front of the other. But for someone that's where Josh is right now, what would you say the next step is after you've got an idea, story, and characters?
Definitely, if you don't have a script written out yet, write a script. and figure out if you're going to be drawing the comic or if you want someone else to draw it. And figure out where you would like to publish it. Would you want to publish it for free as a web comic, or would you like to maybe work with a publisher? And I'm actually going to be looking for a literary agent this year, because that's a way that if you're a writer, you can just have a script and you work with a literary agent. If they like your work, they can pair you up with a publisher who will find an artist for you and that will fit their brand, and then they'll help you market the book, and you're published, and you don't have to worry about printing or shipping or any of that stuff. So definitely starts with a script for me always.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. And the other thing that I would say to Josh is I would start small. 5 pages in this world using one of your characters, and 5 pages, put it out there, see what kind of reaction. I remember, this is back to 2006, 2007. There was I took a comic book script writing class, which was like, after taking a break from making any comics for a couple years, a comic book script writing class got me right back into making comics. And that was like even though I had probably done, half a dozen books and drawn hundreds and hundreds of pages of comics, up until like I had never actually written out a script or learned that skill. But I wrote out a script, and then I'm like, all right, I actually like this 22-page script. It was pretty good, but I also knew, that'd be a lot of work. So I said, well, let me write another one for this series, but it's just gonna be 5 pages. And I'm going to write it, see if I like it, and then draw it, and then see if anyone likes it. And that's what I did. And the feedback was great, or at least good enough for me to want to keep going. And so then I upgraded and did the bigger thing. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, though. Going from idea, story, characters to a script, and I would say just a small script. Write a scene, write a short little introduction, what's the opening credits scene, right? Like, what's the cool hook to get people excited, and just write that and get some feedback on it and see where it goes.
Ditto.
Awesome. Now, one thing I want to heap a little praise on you, Dan, if you don't mind. But in addition to sort of growing your audience and building a following on Webtoons and everything, I have noticed that your art is definitely leveling up, man. And I just we talk a lot on ComixLaunch about, Kickstarter strategies and marketing, building, but end of the day, nothing like the sexier, the better, the better looking, the more higher quality the product that you're offering, the easier it is for all of these strategies to work for you. And so I'm curious, you're someone, you've got a formal degree in art, you went to art school, studied animation, but I know great artists never stop working on developing their talent as an artist. And so what are some of the things that you've been doing, studying, that you've seen over the past year or two that have made a positive impact on your work and your storytelling and, your ability to do that thing you do?
There's a few things. There's study, there's practice, and then there's feedback. So I study other artists specifically who have a style that I would like to emulate in some way. There's a fashion illustrator named Rene Gruot, who I just love his style, and I've kind of been aping parts of it for my comics. There's just comics that I read if I like the way that they're laid out, or I always find things to steal, to incorporate into my art if I can. So study other artists and really sit down and compare your art to theirs and say, why is their art better than mine? Or if that wording makes you uncomfortable, you could say, how is their art different from mine? Are their lines thinner, thicker? Are they thicker in some areas, thinner in other areas? Are their lines all black, or are they brown in some areas, or even a dark blue that looks like it's black? You know what I mean? And you can use like the ink dropper tool in Photoshop to really dissect what other artists are doing. And I'm still developing as an artist, but that's one of the best ways to level up is to, you're welcome, Josh. Thanks for listening. Is to just study the greats and even your peers and contemporaries. and then practice. Just make things that you care about, because then you'll do the best work that you can. Do it often, because you want to keep your hand warm, keep that creative momentum up, and then get feedback. And you'd be surprised who you can get feedback from. I don't want to say his name, but there's a really cool artist. He works in the industry for Marvel and Dark Horse and, you know, major publishers. And I reached out to him, and I actually just got rejected by a publisher for one comic that I submitted with another writer. So I was feeling a little insecure, and I was like, hey man, I want to know, like, is my stuff good, or should I like hire an artist? And that's an option as well. If your art isn't that good yet, but you want to start doing comics professionally, you can hire an artist, and you can pay them to do 5 pages and then Kickstart to fund the rest of it. I just did that with a writer. He didn't have the money to pay me, so we Kickstarted. So, but I got feedback from this artist, and he gave me some specific things to work on. So yeah, those are the 3 things that I would say have helped me the most.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's some great advice, and again, just, you know, keep going. And the other thing that I'd say is just we're all works in progresses, and the idea is to just, you know, you really can't improve on nothing that ever gets completed, because if you're always in this sort of like developmental mode, you won't be able to see that growth. And so launching, I think, is a part of it. And I don't want any of us to wait until we're perfect before we start putting stuff out there, because you know, there's a lot of ways that there's a lot of ways to grow your audience, but none are better than launching. And so I'm glad that you know, I always will look back at some things like the first book, the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic that was sold, like a black and white thing that was sold at a convention, and what that became. And so, you know, if they had waited until it was cartoon ready, they never would have got there. So I think you know, that's something to keep in mind as well. Well, hey, the project looks awesome. I'm included a link, and I hope people will check out Odyssey Inc., the Twin Bengals. Anything else you want to share with the ComixLaunch world and the creators out there before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me, Tyler. I'd say if people want to check out my work, you can go to danekis.com, danekis.com. There's actually a free preview of this comic, Odyssey Inc., when you sign up for my mailing list, and links to my YouTube and stuff through there. But and yeah, check out the Kickstarter if you want. But I would say just one last tip on audience building that I didn't get to mention is share all your dirty secrets, because that's what people want. People come to me because I'm very open with sharing my knowledge and experience, and I don't know everything, you know what I'm saying? But I'm still a student like everybody else. We're all learning. But if you can share things that people have never heard before, and it's like, oh, I can't believe they're sharing this. This is so good.
Yeah. People
stick to you like glue. One example is my most popular video on YouTube is how to get art commissions on the internet. And that's how I made my living for a long time, was getting art commissions through Craigslist. And I said, well, if I put this out there, isn't that going to affect me? Is it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I was a little hesitant, but I'm like, dude, this is going to help a lot of people. So I put it out there, and my channel blew up because of it. So when you're willing to share and help other people, man, don't hold anything back. Just focus on serving your audience, helping other people, and they'll thank you for it.
Yeah, good things definitely come from that. Well, love the stuff that you're doing, Dan. Appreciate you sharing your insight with all of us, and can't wait to see how this all ends up. But I think you're rocking and rolling, and the campaign's off to a great start, and the book looks absolutely amazing. So I'm excited for your success now, and a whole lot more to come.
Thank you, brother. And one more plug for the ComixLaunch course, worth the money, because it just made me like $1,600 today. So for my campaign.
Well,
so
man,
thank you, Tyler.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you being part of the community.
Thank you, man.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Can't wait to see what you all launch next too.